I'm certain I'm not doing this animation in the most efficient way, and I'm not even that happy with the end result, but I think it's always better to finish something that you start than to give up. Mad respect to any animators out there, this is not easy. Today we're going to look at the watch I tend to wear the most out of everything in my collection with casual wear at the weekends. As SPB253J1 doesn't easily roll off the tongue, this watch is also known as the Black Series Limited Edition 1965. It's part of the wider Prospex Black Series, and in particular belongs to a series of 3 watches themed after 1965, 1968 and 1970 releases, each different styles of divers, but all featuring the same colour scheme and strap. For the sake of brevity, I'll just call it the 1965 from this point onwards. As a limited edition, I think the 1965 is the only Black Series model that's out of stock on the Seiko website. At the very least, it's no longer listed, but it can still be found at other UK and global stores that stock Seiko models. There is a finite number out there though. Each watch is numbered from a total production line of 5,500 watches, so not exactly tiny numbers, but the most popular of the 3 models released at the very least. If you do struggle to find one, other colourways that aren't limited editions exist. The SPB253J1 has a more classic colourway. There's the budget-friendlier basic model that comes without the kimono style strap, and 2 versions on a bracelet. My pick beyond the watch that I actually own would be the Save the Ocean version for the blue textured dial. When I say I like this version, it took my wife calling me a madman for buying a different colour of something I already own to stop me. The 1965 range is the pinnacle of what a dive watch should look like for me. You can get a more expensive brand name on the dial, Swiss made and a heftier price tag, but the aesthetic here is basic, extremely well executed and timeless. Ironically, some of these models that are not limited are actually more expensive than the black version. Though I think it's worth mentioning that the SPB283J1, though more expensive, does come with 2 colour variants of the strap. On a side note, when it comes to making a choice between them, I'd have a lot more confidence buying a Seiko that wasn't on an in-house bracelet. They're known to be one of the weaker parts of their offerings. For me, there wasn't really actually much of a choice. This watch always had to have some orange to it because of what it represents to me. I mentioned in a previous video that the Grand Seiko in my collection had been funded by selling my childhood Pokemon collection. This watch was actually funded by 1 card, a first edition base set Charizard that I got on holiday while in Portugal. I wasn't exactly careful with it, I think I was 13 when I got it, but I wanted to pass it on so that it wasn't just sat in my loft and someone could actually get some enjoyment out of it. That said, I wanted something to remember the card by, so that flash of orange on a Japanese watch, to me it's not just a style option, it means picking Charmander in Pallet Town, it means trading cards on the playground and battling them at weekends. Absolutely daft, I know, but that's what this watch means to me. Actually, if you read the advertising blurb, the orange is there to represent the colour of night divers' lamps that were in use back in the 60s. I do think this is a really appealing colourway. It certainly stands out from the rest of my collection. The orange minute hand is a really nice piece of contrast, though this model lacks the red pip at the end of the second hand that the other Black Series models feature. I've mentioned in previous videos, I tend to wear watches that reflect how I'm feeling and that my mental health isn't exactly the greatest. All I can say on that front is that I tend to wear a lot of black, and this clearly fits into that vibe, so it sees a fair amount of wear time, especially outside of work. I mentioned before that the 12 from Christopher Ward is my most worn watch, and that's certainly true on work days, but at weekends this really fits my casual style. Having said that, the matte finish across the surfaces and the dial gives it somewhat of a stealth feel, an aesthetic that's easy to marry up with casual or formal wear. Having said all that, the orange accents are not my favourite part of this watch. That distinction goes to the strap. The design is the first in-house strap from Seiko made of nylon. It features a traditional Japanese texture pattern which matches the design of kimono belts. Now, that might not mean much to many people, but when you spent a good portion of your childhood watching Zatoichi and The Last Samurai, it's a really nice little detail. The strap is not just there for aesthetics though. It's designed with flexibility and durability in mind, and is easily the most comfortable watch strap that I own. It is a NATO strap, so it's worth bearing in mind that it does add a fair bit of extra height to the watch. If they made a thinner version, I could see a world where I would wear something like this as a bracelet even without the watch. The strap has colour matched metal loops, with the larger one that links the NATO together bearing Seiko branding. It's also worth noting that the watch also comes with an extra silicone strap, but that's never even left the box with me, so I won't discuss it here. The Prospex name stands for Professional Specifications. They're still tool watches, but designed to withstand harsh conditions and with higher quality materials and movements used in production. The case is very durable and hasn't shown any scratches, nicks or dents visible to the naked eye in a year of semi-regular wear. The movement here is a 6R35. This is not the sort of movement you're going to find being resold in Chinese automatics like the NH34. It's thinner than the 6R15 movement that it's effectively replaced, and has an upgraded power reserve, taking it from the 50 hours of the 6R15 to 70 hours. It's getting close to Tissot Powermatic figures there, but in a more traditionally designed movement. Not that you'll be seeing it on the Prospex, it's a tool watch, so it has a solid case back. It's designed with the NATO strap in mind, so an exhibition case back wouldn't make any sense here. It also isn't period correct, and it'd be covered anyway. I'd also add that for my watch it was actually impossible to get the case back off with standard watch tools. I'm assuming it's because the tolerances for a 200 metres diver are considerably higher than my usual 100 metre watches, but it does mean I can't show you the movement. You'd need a watchmaker's vice to get this case back off, which limits some of the cheaper service options. As I mentioned earlier, this is a limited edition. The case back comes with the usual spec details and branding, as well as the individual watch number. In the centre of the case back is a relief of what closely resembles Hokusai's Great Wave off Kanagawa. It isn't much of an accolade, given that I'm no one special and not remotely interested in art, but the Great Wave is my favourite piece of artwork. A few years ago I visited the Hokusai Museum in Japan, and as I've mentioned before, I'm a very big fan of Japanese culture, so this little detail really appeals to me. The same wave motif features on a small patch sewn onto the underside of the NATO strap, something you'd honestly never see, but a nice touch nonetheless. In terms of negatives, the watch comes in at 40.5mm and wears large on wrist because of that NATO strap. The exact same thing but slightly smaller would have been preferable for me. Somewhere around 38.5mm would be the absolute sweet spot in my opinion. 40.5 is just on the cusp of the upper range of what I think I can pull off. When it comes to the other measurements, it's worth bearing in mind that this is part of the Prospex range, rated to 20 atmospheres of pressure, essentially as far as you could dive without needing to mix helium into your tank. The reality for the overwhelming majority of watch owners is that absolutely no diving will take place, so actually a larger depth rating often just means a little more bulk on wrist, especially on the NATO strap, which is double looped. This has significant presence in terms of height, a lot more than I would usually consider wearing, and definitely something to consider before purchasing. For me, I love the design so much that it's just something I've learnt to live with, even if it wouldn't be a personal preference. Beyond that, the other two things I'd highlight with the 1965 are the date window and the printed logo on the dial. The date window eating into the loom at 3, with the loom that is there pushed into the second marks, is definitely preferable to me over having a date window at a diagonal angle, and I can understand that they're going for visual balance. But as there are no numbers printed on the dial anyway, I think it would have looked better being slightly more central. While the printing on the dial is slightly raised, I'd have preferred a more premium feeling applied metal logo. These criticisms are both being really picky though. Neither is close to being a deal breaker for me. The loom is designed to be functional after a dive to a depth of 200 meters, so it comes as no surprise that it's really impressive here. It certainly goes well beyond what you would need for regular everyday wear. To sum up, while it doesn't quite take the title of the favourite piece I have in my collection, I am a big fan of this watch. If it's possible for a watch to represent someone's personality, I think this is going a long way towards representing me. It certainly isn't perfect, and it isn't for everyone, but if it speaks to you, just remember there are only a limited number out there. To the people who've been following the channel that have made it this far to the end of the video, I'd just like to pass on a little bit of what's been going on behind the scenes. This week I was greeted by this message on Adobe Animate. My file corrupted and at one point I was looking at around 20 hours worth of work on the channel intro. Eventually I managed to find a working backup, so it only cost me 3 hours in total. It might be one of the most boring things in the world, but version management and backups have been absolute lifesavers this week. As always, thank you for watching the video. Just going to finish with this little blooper. I'm going to experiment with some other video ideas and weave them into this series, which is essentially me going through my collection. Any thoughts or comments? As ever, the whole point of the channel is to foster some discussion. If this is your first time watching one of my videos and you've made it this far, please consider liking and subscribing.